What's going on, guys? I hope everybody had a good weekend. At the end of the last video, we made it so that when you go into a room that has an enemies folder, the doors close and you can't go out of the room until you kill all the enemies in the room. Well, in our case, in the last video, to make it shorter, we actually just use a cube for the enemy. And the way that it works is when you click on the cube disappears and the doors open. In this video, we're going to be setting up this zombie that I made. So this is a zombie that I put together in Blender. So the entire project is going to be available in the description of the video for free. You can download the entire project because if you set up the A-star algorithm previously, it's possible that it won't work the same way that mine is working. So you're welcome to download the entire project. And this zombie is also going to be available in the description for free. You're welcome to use it in your game or whatever you want to. I don't really care. So if you remember the A-star algorithm, let me just turn gizmos on so you can see. So when the game starts, this gigantic grid gets drawn on your game. And if you put an obstacle in here, he'll go around the obstacle in the most efficient manner possible. This is the best way that I found so far of working on pathing. I might have him do different things. Like having him just chase after the player is not the greatest because right now he's following directly after the player, but it would be better if he were to try to cut the player off and try to make some like different maneuvers to get in front of the player to make it more interesting. I'm not going to do that in this video because that is very complicated logic and it's not something I'm going to be showing you right now. And I have to work on it still. So I'm just going to put an obstacle in the room so you can see how the A-star algorithm is working. So let's put a cube. And remember, any obstacles that you want to be affected by the algorithm, they have to be put on the obstacle layer. If you don't put it on the obstacle layer, it won't go around it. That way you can have things like chests and stuff like that that won't block the zombie or whatever monsters you put in the room. So we're just going to lock this and make it bigger. And then I'm just going to move it. Let me just do this in scene view. We'll just move it over here and then we'll just unlock this and make the x-axis bigger and just bring it. Oh shit. Bring it this way a little bit. Let's go back to the game view. So if we run this again, you'll be able to see that there's red around where the obstacle is. And the zombie can't walk on the red tiles. He can only walk on the white tiles. You could also, if your computer's lagging when you turn this on, the A-star grid, I've set it up to be a node radius of 1. If you change this number to a higher number like 3 or higher, let's just put 3, I'll show you. This will make the tiles bigger. Now, the problem with the tiles being bigger is that it's less exact, right? So he'll walk further around the edges. And in some cases, like right here, I'm walking on a red tile. He can't get me because I'm on a red tile. If your node radius is smaller, then that won't happen. So yeah, I'm not going to go all the way through what the algorithm is, but we're going to be working on that. And then the other things are, I don't know if you can see this or not, but he has an outline around him. There's like a very thin white outline. I'm going to show you how I did that. It's just a package I downloaded from the Unity Asset Store. And then I also put a cartoon shader on him. So you can see that he's like cartoony. He's got like these lines or whatever. Yeah, so we're going to do that as well. Again, that's just a video that I copied from someone else. And then we also need to make it so when we hit him, he takes damage and he has health. And he needs to change color when we hit him to like pink or something for a second and then change back. And then he also needs to have like some type of death animation when he dies. This might be a really long video. So if you're watching this, you might want to get your coffee or something because this is probably going to be at least an hour long. And then you can copy the code that we use on all of your enemies. So the bonus, I guess, is that you could use this code. If you create another enemy, you're not going to have to start over again. You could just copy paste this code onto another enemy that you make. We're just going to be doing generic chasing. So it's valid for a lot of different enemy types, and then you can modify it slightly for each enemy that you have so it's not so boring. But yeah, if you guys are enjoying the series so far, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And yeah, all right, so the first thing you need to do is drag in the zombie robot file. So this is going to be attached in the description of the video, this FBX file. So you need to find it in your downloads folder and then drag it into the Explorer at the bottom of your project. And then from there, you can drag it directly into room 0, which is your starting room. So then we want to just drag him away from the starting point. So I'm in the scene view here and I'm just using the transform thing to, if you use the green button, it will only move it on like X and Z, and just drag him away from the starting spot so he's not on top of your character. And then what you can do is if you press this little locky button on the right, you can make him bigger. So you can make him as big as you want. I'm going to use like 4.3 or something like that. And then if you just get a side view of him, the origin of him is actually a little bit above the ground. So if you just drag him up a little bit, until he's off the ground. And yeah. All right, so now that the zombie is in the scene, if you click on the game view, you can see that the camera has changed to the one that is attached to the zombie. So there's these two area lights that you can delete. We're going to be using our own lighting from inside of Unity. These are just things that I use to actually render like the picture of the actual zombie. Yeah, so we're going to turn that off. I'm going to leave the camera on for now, just while we're creating like the materials for the zombie. And then afterwards, when I'm done, then we're going to delete the camera. So what we want to do is the first thing is if you right click, you can create a material at the bottom here, and we're going to call this zombie cartoon material. And this is going to be the material that you saw in the preview. So if you click on the robot and you go to the materials tab, if you click on the zombie and you go to the materials tab, you can drag this zombie cartoon material onto the metal slots. And we'll just click apply here. And then if we click on this cartoon material, you need to make a cartoon shader graph. I'm going to link you to the video that I used to do that. You can, if you're not going to do this, you can just change this to be like green or something if you want to, that's fine. But I'm going to be using the shader graph that I'm going to link you to a cartoon video. So basically this is the shader graph. Somebody else did a really good job making the video on how to make this. And so I'm going to link that video, and you can get that link from the description of the video. And after you've followed that video, you should have this exact result in your game view. And there's this variable called shades, and if you lower it, there's more detail that gets added to the zombie. And the closer to 0 that you get, the more like little lines you get on it. It's pretty cool. So what we want to do is, I think that's actually, that's a good color. Let me just change this a little bit greener than that. And at this point, we're going to delete this camera because I want to get the top-down view so we can see what it actually looks like. So because we're playing a top-down game, it's really important to get the perspective that you're actually going to be playing in. Like, you can see that this kind of looks weird from the side because of the lines, but in the actual game view, it doesn't look weird. It looks normal. So we just want to take this material and actually lower the shades just a little bit more. And you can see this adds more fading to it, and maybe something like, yeah, 0.08 is good. Yeah, so that's all I did for the cartoon material. And now in order to make the metal material, actually, let's get a side view again. So we need materials for the top metal and the bottom metal, sorry, not metal, plastic, and then his eyes as well. We could do that. So if you right click at the bottom here, you can create another material, and we'll just call this top plastic, and then press Control D, and we'll just call this one bottom plastic. And then we'll press Control D again, and we'll just call this zombie eyes. Okay, so then in the robot, again, you just want to drag the top plastic into base and base 001. Bottom plastic can go into base alt, and then eyes can go into eyes, and we're just going to press apply. Now the eyes, you don't need to change them if you don't want to. So if you're happy with the way that the eyes looked initially, the way that I'm going to do it will look a little bit different. It doesn't matter, right? Like you can put whatever materials you want on the zombie. That's not the point of this video. Anyway, let's just quickly set this up. So the top plastic, we just want to make this like highly metallic. So it's kind of like shiny, and then turn down the smoothness. And we're just going to make this like kind of like, and then we're going to take the bottom plastic, and we're also going to make that metallic. And you probably could have copied this after the fact. It might have been better. And it just needs to be a different shade. So like, I don't know, just pick whatever material, like whatever color you want. And then you can play with like the different settings here. It's important to note that you can't really see this, right? It's you get a top-down view of the game, and this part of the zombie is not visible. So the color of him down here doesn't really matter. Just go back to this for a second. So base alt. I think this second one should actually be bottom plastic too. Yeah, that's what, so they're two-toned. Yeah. So the base 001 and base alt are both bottom plastic, and then the base is top plastic. So again, like I said, just change this to whatever you want. And then the zombie eyes, we're just going to make these green. Maybe just a really light green. And then we're going to turn on the emission, and we're going to make that green too. And then you could turn up the intensity. The brighter it is, the brighter it will glow. Don't make it too bright because it will like it kind of takes away from it if it's too bright. You just want to make it so like it's just bright. So like maybe like I would do a maximum of 2. But again, if you're following this, you could just make it as bright as you want to, or it doesn't matter. All right, so then the next step is to add the outline that I use. Now, I just downloaded this from the asset store, so I'm going to be posting a link to this in the description of the video. After you click add to my assets, you'll get like an import window and you can click import. The only thing you need to import is this script that's inside of it. So there's like a test scene and all this extra stuff inside of it. You don't need any of that stuff. You just need the outline. And then from there, all you have to do is drag this outline directly onto your robot. Now, there's a lot of ways to outline your objects. Like there's shaders that do it. You could do it as a post-processing setting. But because our robot is separated into a bunch of different parts, like the body and the arms and everything, they're all separate. You would have to add a material to each object individually if you wanted to do this. Using this script is so much quicker and easier. Now, you can't see this in the scene view. So when you're not playing the game, you can't actually see this. It only shows up when you actually hit play. So let's turn off gizmos. And you can see that if you've added this correctly, it adds this white outline to the zombie. And this is like, this is the best way like to do this. I spent hours the other day trying to find a good way to do this. And this script is definitely just, it's incredible. You can change the width. So I would play with this and get something that you like. 2 seems to be good for me, but if you like something a little bit thinner or thicker, you can set that up and just copy it and make sure you apply that when you're not running the game so that it will save without that there. But yeah, this is how I added the outline, and this seems to be incredible for this, right? And you can obviously, you can change the color and stuff too. So if you wanted this to be black, black looks really good as well, and you can make it thicker and thinner. And all right, so that's it for setting up the zombie. As for like the materials and the appearance of it, the next thing we need to do is animate the zombie. Now, lucky for us, the zombie only has one animation, his walking animation, and we're just gonna put that as the default animation for now, because this video could also be really long if we went into like turning on and off animations and stuff like that. We're not gonna do that for this video. We are going to do that in future videos, but just for right now, we're not going to. If you click on the robot FBX file that you dragged into the bottom and you go to the rig tab, we want to generate an avatar for the model. So just click create from this model and press apply. And then on the robot that's already in the scene, there should be an animator there. If you don't have this, you can click add component and just add an animator. And then we need to make an animator controller for the zombie. So if we right click at the bottom, we can create an animator controller, and we could just call this zombie controller, or whatever you want to call it. If you double click on it, you get this screen. You just need to right click and create an empty state. This will be the default state. So this will be happening immediately when your game starts. When the zombie is enabled in the scene, this will happen automatically. And then we want to drag the walking or the running animation. So if you click the drop down arrow beside your robot, you can see there is a running animation inside of this. If you don't see it in the details view, there's like a scrolly bar at the bottom right here. You might see this. So you can just drag this to the left here and just drag running into the, if you click on new state here, you can drag running into the motion slot. And then if you click on the robot and you go to animations, you just want to click running and click loop time. This will make this happen in repeat. So it will just keep happening over and over again. And then we want to change the speed of his running to 2 or higher, which this is a personal preference depending on how fast you want your zombie to be moving. So let's hit save on this. And okay, so after you do this, you have to drag that animator controller into this controller slot on the animator like this. And if you've done this correctly, you should see your zombie walking on the spot like a madman. So he's just kind of wobbling along and he's not moving yet or anything, but this is the animation, right? And because he's always going to be chasing after the player, as he moves, it'll just be doing this animation. Now, in the real game, like at a later time, what we'll do is we'll have the speed of this animation controlled by if he's moving, like how fast he's actually moving towards the player. If he's not moving, this speed should get turned to 0, like based on how fast he's actually moving. That way his feet are actually matching. So like if he's standing still because he can't get to the player, he shouldn't still be doing the animation. It should stop while he stopped. But we're not going to be doing that in this video because again, it takes much longer to make a video that has all of those details in it. So we're not going to be doing that in this video. We're just going to be making him animated and he's just going to be running all the time. But at a later video, I will show you how to make it so that you can control when his animations happen. All right. So the next thing we need to do is we need to make a script for our zombie to actually chase our player around. So before we do this, we're just going to create a rigid body on our zombie. because this is how we're going to move our zombie. In order for him to crash into the enemy and for him to do damage, we need a rigid body, and we also need a box collider. Or you could use a mesh collider if you really want to, but box collider should be fine. So after you've added the box collider, you could just, in the scene view, just drag it so that it is around your zombie, so that it's a relatively okay hit radius. Again, the mesh collider is more accurate, but it comes at the cost of performance. You don't really need a mesh collider for this. And then the rigid body just frees the rotation on all of the angles so that it's not falling over or anything like that. And I think that's good. So if we right click at the bottom here, we can create a new C# script, and we can call this zombie script tutorial. And then after you've done this, you can drag the script directly onto your zombie in the open space at the bottom. And then you could double click on your script to open it. Okay, so when you open your script, it should look like this. We're just gonna delete the start and the update method for now. And we're just gonna change this so it inherits from the class unit, which is what we made in the previous videos when we did a whole series on like the A-star algorithm and enemy movement and enemies chasing your player around and stuff like that, right? So this is the class that we have for units. And we're gonna be adding some variables directly to the unit, like the health and stuff like that. But just really quickly, if you didn't watch the previous video, this is probably not going to make a lot of sense to you. I'm not going to go into how this is working. You have to go watch the other videos if you want to do that. And when I made this, I followed a series by Sebastian Legout, and I think I linked that in that other video, and he does an even better job explaining it than I did. So you can go and watch that if you want to. But so the main thing that we need to worry about in this entire thing is this follow path action. So when a method is virtual, this means that if a class inherits from it and we don't implement this method, it will do this instead, right? So if we implement this method, like if we actually create the method here, it will do the method that we create in the subclass. But if we don't implement it, it will do this virtual method that is in the base class. So we don't want to do this method because this is using translate, which means that the transform will translate towards the target and it won't hit the player, because if it's not using the rigid body to move, it will ignore physics. And part of the physics is the collision with the player, right? So if you use translate, it won't actually crash into your player. So we're going to leave this as is, and I'll show you what happens when you run it just the way that it is. So you can see that I've dragged my stickman container onto the target here already. And we have two scripts set up already. We have chase player and random path. So right now we're going to be chasing the player. So if you put it on 0, it will chase the player. So we're going to leave it like this, and let's hit play, and I'll show you what happens if you use this method the way it is. So you can see that he's immediately fallen into the ground and he's slowly moving kind of towards the player, but it's not doing what we want it to do. So we're going to stop out of this. And ideally, we're probably going to need to fix this because this will not be useful ever. We're not ever going to want to translate anything towards the player unless it's like maybe you kill someone and it has like a little floaty, like a coin or something that's chasing the player. Maybe in that case it will be good, but in a case where we have an enemy that's chasing the player, this is not valid. So we want to override that method. So if we type in override public void follow path action path int path index. So by declaring this method, because this method is virtual, when this method is supposed to run, instead of it running the base class version of the method, which is this, it will run this version that we're about to write. So what we want to do is we want to rotate the enemy towards the player, but we don't want to rotate it on like any of the axis except for Y. We only want him to horizontally look at the player, but we don't want him to look up or down. Like, let me just do it in this mode. So like we don't want him, because the origin of the zombie is at its feet. If he tries to look towards the origin of the player, which is his stomach, he falls backwards, right? Because he's trying to look at it, but we only want him to look at it on the y-axis, which is this, right? Like we only want him to rotate on the y-axis. We don't want him to rotate on the x-axis or the z-axis. So we're gonna just we're only gonna be rotating it on the y-axis. So we need to set that up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do quaternion target rotation is equal to quaternion.look rotation. So he's going to be looking at the current index of the points. So there's like, you see all those dots on the ground where the zombie is going towards the points. He's not going to look directly at the player. He's going to be looking at the look points. Okay, so this is the target, is the look point that's on the ground. It's not the player itself, because he's looking towards where he's walking to. He's not looking directly towards the player. And then we want to take the other axes away. So we're going to call this new TR. And then we'll do quaternion.Euler. So 0 on the x-axis. And then target rotation Euler angles dot y, and then 0. So we're only taking the y-axis of this target rotation. We're not taking the x or the z-axis. So this will prevent him from looking up or down, essentially. And then we want to set the rotation of our enemy, which is, when you type in transform, it's going to be the game object that this script is attached to. That's the transform that it will be editing automatically. And then we want to slurp towards that. So quaternion.slurp. Okay, so this will slowly rotate the zombie towards that location, but only a maximum of the turn speed per frame. So instead of the zombie immediately snapping to the direction of the point, because let's say we have, well, this is not very big. Let's say we have, this is the zombie, right? And then this is like an obstacle, and this is the player. So it's going to draw points like this, and maybe it will draw a point like this. When the zombie gets here, he's going to be looking this way, right? Because this is the direction between these 2 points. When he gets here, we don't want him to immediately look this way. We want him to slowly look this way over time. So like this is the quote unquote turn speed, right? This is how fast he will turn. I know you guys love my drawings. Anyway, so we want him to slurp between the 2 rotations instead of immediately turning to the new rotation, because it will look very snappy if he just immediately turns. And you don't want to put your turn speed too high either, because that will also make it very, very snappy. So you can change we're going to work on that afterwards. We're going to set a different speed and everything afterwards. So after we're done that, we want to create a vector 3, and we have this vector 3 called translation, and that is the front of the zombie times the speed. So this is where we're moving towards when we move the rigid body, right? So this is in front. So the character is looking in a direction. Let me go back to my paint thing, right? So he's looking in these directions, and we want him to move towards the direction that he's looking the entire time. We don't want him to start moving this way when he's still looking this way. He should be just moving forward and like directly in front of him. And then we're going to call the rigid body move position of the rigid body position plus the translation. So we're going to be, this is the position he's in, and this is the position he's moving to. Inside of our unit script, in the start method, we're getting this rigid body already. So that's how we have a variable here called RB. We're getting that in the start method of the unit class. So all of our units will have a rigid body attached to them, and it will get the rigid body on the start method. So that's how this exists. And then we're moving towards this position. And then we're going to set the velocity to 0. Sorry, it's not 0. It's a vector 3.0 because there's 3 variables for it. So this will prevent him from gaining momentum and acting like a race car. We just want him to only just move in the direction. We don't want him to build up speed or anything like that, because then he'll end up looking like a race car instead. So if we've done this correctly, he should chase the player, and it should look pretty realistic. Now, he still won't do anything when he hits the player, but this should look a lot better than it did before. So let's run this and see what happens. Okay, so you can see he's chasing the player, and he's staying pointed towards the player. Now, one thing I noticed is that he's falling into the ground, which he's not supposed to be doing that. So let's click on the robot and go into the rigid body, and we're going to freeze the position on the y-axis, because y is up and down in like the up and down world. So like this is up and down. So we're just going to freeze the y-axis so he can't fall through the ground. And then this box collider can actually go up a little bit so that it's closer to his feet. We want it to be like right on his feet, like right there. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, let's run this again. Okay, so now you can see he's above the ground. He's not falling into the ground because we locked him on his rigid body, so he can't go downwards. He's moving extremely slow in this case, so we want to speed him up a lot. So make sure you press play so this doesn't affect it. You could also do this while it's running, but then you just have to memorize the values. So let's change the speed to 35. And we're going to change the turn distance to 7 and this turn speed to 7. The turn distance is explained thoroughly in the previous video series. It's kind of hard to explain, so I'm not going to do that right now, but you can see that this looks pretty good. And okay, so we have the same problem where I've set this to 3. The A-star grid node radius, I set that to 3. Just change it back to 1 for now. You can experiment with this if you want to, obviously, but changing it to 1 will make it so that he doesn't get stuck. Okay, so now he's chasing, but when he walks into me, it doesn't do anything, right? So also, if he walks into me, it looks like I go on top of him because he's trying to get to my exact position. And if we move, there's like a conflict and it'll go on top of it. So we don't want that. What we want to happen is if he collides with me, it should damage me, right? So let's set that up now. So on collision enter, if the collision.collider.name is equal to stick man container, then we're going to need a variable called hit player. So let's type in bool hit player here and we'll set it to false. The reason we need this variable is because if we walk into this can happen multiple times per frame. Like if you just crash into him and you don't have a limiter to prevent this from happening multiple times, the player will just die immediately. So we'll set hit player to be true. And then inside of this override method, if hit player is true, then we just want to return so that we're not following the player anymore. And then after a certain period of time, we'll make it so that you can follow the player again. So to create another method called void, public void, give player a second. And then inside of this, we can invoke this after a certain period of time. So we can invoke name of give player a second. And then this is the time between, so the enemy is going to stop moving because hit player is going to be true, right? So we're setting hit player to true here. And the enemy will stop moving because this is returning from this. So this code is not going to run while this is true. After 0.2 seconds, then this will run and we'll set hit player to be false again so that he can continue chasing it. So instead of him just continuously chasing the player forever after he hits him, it will stop for a second so that the player can get away and then carry on, right? So that way, this will also prevent him from walking on top of the player. If he stops, then you'll have a chance to get away. And then after 2 seconds, you'll be able to hit him again. So this actually needs to be in brackets. So I didn't put a bracket here. That's why it's underlined. And then this can be not in brackets. So in between hit player and this, we need to hit our player, right? So we have a class called impact receiver where we can add an impact on a game object, which our player is a game object. And so this is the full syntax of this, okay? So we've got some variables in here. So this will add an impact on a game object because our player is using a player controller. It's not using a rigid body. So you can't add force the way that you normally would because it's using a character controller. We went over this in a previous video. Again, if you don't know what this is, you have to go watch the previous video. This will be included. The whole project is available for download in the description. So this should already work if you are using my project. If not, you have to watch the series to catch up to where we are in order to know what this is. But so we need to enter the player's transform game object. This is the game object that's going to be moved. Then we're going to be moving based on this variable called player knockback. So there's a bunch of settings for our players in this static class called player. And the knockback is how far the character will be knocked back when he gets hit by an enemy or whatever hits him, right? So this will knock our character backwards. And then we have another script that deals damage. So we have a heart script, which we made in a previous video again, and we can do take damage, and then we just have to type in the amount of damage that we want to do. So in this case, we're going to do 1 damage. If the player runs out of health, this will already kill the player. So if you press F12 on this, you can see what this does. Again, we're not going to go through this in this video because we went over this in a different video. So this will damage the player, this will push the player back, and then this will allow the player 0.2 seconds to get their shit together and move away from the zombie, right? So I think that's set up correctly. So let's hit play and see what happens here. Yeah, so you see, like, when the zombie walks into us, we take damage and we get knocked back. And if we get hit a third time, we die. All right, guys, that's unfortunately all the time I have for today. I'm going to have to do a part 2 video where we actually put the enemy into room 6, and the other rooms where you want to put it, you can put it in any of the rooms, but we need to put him into room 6 still. And we also need to make it so when you hit him with an attack, he flashes a different color. We also need to add health to him so that he has like damage. We also need to make him have a death animation and a visual effect. I think the combination of that stuff is probably going to take quite some time to demonstrate it, and I don't want to rush it. This video is already really long. It's already over 30 minutes. And I think videos that are over 30 minutes have less chance of people watching them. So there will be a part 2 of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you did, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And I will see you guys in the next one.